All right, so by looking at your to-do list, your daily assignments, you should be getting ready to start your notes. So again, format is very important when it comes to our notebook. However, I understand that this is a different circumstance. So format will not be judged, only the content. And you will also get a notebook grade for your quizzes that you take based off of these notes. So make sure that you are taking good notes, that they are neat and legible, that you're following along. You do not have to listen to these lectures. However, they will definitely provide some more insight and explain some things that you might not completely understand just based off of reading. Excuse me. But okay, here we go. So on the left-hand side of your notebook would just be a blank page. This is the inside cover of your notebook. You have your name, government notebook. The reason why I have you write your name on the first page is because, like I said, you do get a grade for your notes. They are very, very, very important to this class. Pretty much the basis of our entire learning. So because we do have to take a lot of notes in class, I feel like you should get a grade for them. And so when you turn them in, you turn them into a folder, which corresponds to this number. But we'll get into that when you guys return back to school, when we turn back to school, excuse me. But so when you turn it in, it's easier for me, like if I'm grading, I have to step away, or if it gets misplaced or anything like that, that I can see, oh, this is so-and-so's notebook. Great. And then I can put it back, or I can give you the correct grade for it. So then we would flip the page. This would be the back page of that Your Name Government Notebook, and then this is our title page. We will have a title page for every unit. So there you go. All right, so we are going to start talking about the foundations of government. The reason for it is because we need to talk about what is the government, why did government originate, what are the functions of it, and what is the deal with America and our government. Why are you in this class? Why are we taking it? So on and so forth. All right, so how I set up my pages, this kind of looks like a notebook, right? You can see the little lines, and this is the margins and so on. I label my pages 1L and 1R. Next set, when you flip this page, would be 2L, 2R. L stands for left, R stands for right. The reason that I do this is because I like conformity. I like being able to have you guys open up your notebook and lay it flat, and that this page over here would directly correspond to this page over here. So rather than this being like a normal textbook or just a normal book in general where it says 1, 2, 3, 4, so on, I like the fact that these go together, okay? So your quizzes will be labeled based off of what page number we're on. Do not feel like you have to label them. However, it is nice, especially when you miss a day or are confused about something or whatever, then you can come back and be like, oh, coach, I missed Thursday, and when I left, we were on page 1L, but now we're on page 3L. Is there anything that I need in between? Okay, so it kind of helps you, it keeps me organized, keeps you guys organized, and it kind of helps you know where you left off and you're not really playing a guessing game. But all right, with that all being said, let's jump right in. So first we have the establishment of government. Aristotle is the first person who really kind of gave us this idea of what government is. He was a Greek philosopher. You've definitely heard his name before. He was besties with Pluto. Not Pluto, I'm sorry, Plato. Gosh, you guys, I think I already have coronavirus. Yeah, but he also gave us the idea of what's called polis. The idea of that a state is consisting of a city and the surrounding countryside. Think of things like Metropolis, Indianapolis, Annapolis, all of those different things. All that means is that we have a central point, which was like the inner city or any sort of city, and then think of that as kind of like a bullseye. That's the centerpiece. Just outside of it, that first ring would be the what's called suburbs. That's where we are. Suburban, meaning underneath urban. And then that third ring on the outside would be the countryside. And Apollos is tying all of that together and seeing how all three of those different living styles work in harmony. So we have these three different words. We have nation, state, and country. And a nation is essentially where people are bound together based off of history, tradition, and culture. They do not have to have a state, okay? A state is that actual political unit that has sovereignty. What sovereignty means is the ability to govern itself, okay? Think of reign right here. This form of reign means that you have authority over something. So like a monarch would reign over a certain territory. They have power over that territory. Sovereign means yourself. So be able to govern yourself. States have nations, but nations do not always need states. A prime example is Kurdistan. Kurdistan used to be a country. It has since fallen along with the Ottoman Empire. So people still are alive today. There's a lot of them that identify as Kurds. Yes, Kurds, not cheese curds, but same idea. Same pronunciation. Kurds do not have a state to go home to. It is now bits and pieces of Iraq, Syria, Armenia, Iran, all those different places. However, that does not mean that their culture, their history, traditions, languages, religions, all of those things do not just disappear because the actual political unit did, the actual borders did. Okay, so states have nations, but nations do not always need states. Country is also just another word for state. We have these 4 origins of the state. I'm going to start with evolutionary theory. Evolutionary theory essentially is exactly what it sounds like. I don't really need to read to you. States evolved from ancient family groups. Force theory, the best way I like to describe this is when you and your friends at the end of the night at a football game before coronavirus, you guys went to a football game and you said, oh my gosh, I'm so hungry. I haven't eaten since 4 o'clock. Now it's 11:30 and I want to go somewhere. You and your friends cannot decide on a restaurant to go to. You've got somebody wants to go to Chick-fil-A, somebody wants to go to Waffle House, somebody else wants to go to Cane's, and another person wants to go to Cookout. And none of you can really figure out what's going on. There's a lot of bickering and so on. However, you decide, you know what, guys? I drove us here. I have the keys to the car. We are going to Cookout, whether you like it or not. So that's where we're going. If you don't like it, tough. That is force theory. Force theory says that people needed to cooperate and survive, so therefore one person just took control and created all of the aspects behind a state. Divine right theory is probably the most simple one that you have heard of before. It says that European rulers, God came to them. It's usually European rulers, but it happens in other places. It says that God or whoever their deity came to them in a dream, or that they have better blood or something like that, where they have the right to rule based on that alone. Yeah. Social contract theory. This is kind of like an airport where if you've ever flown before, you know that you have to, when you go, you have to check in and you have your boarding pass and your license or your ID, or maybe mom and dad had it for you, whatever. And you wait in line, and then they check your ID, check your boarding pass, and then you have to go through security, where you have to take off your shoes, take off a coat, if you're wearing one, remove jewelry, put your bags through an x-ray scanner. You now have to go through an x-ray scanner, all of these different things. And it seems really excessive. However, as a society, we have decided that this is okay because we know that those things are put in place for us to live and for us to be safe. So what social contract theory says is that we give up bits and pieces of our freedom in order for order and security. Also, I'm really sorry, you guys. I've never done this before, so things might be a little all over the place or a little weird. So just bear with me. Thank you for your patience. Okay. So then we have the essential features of a state. There are 4 of them. And while we walk through them, I want you to think about your bedroom or your house. So first we have population. Population is just who is there. Now, when it comes to your bedroom, is it just you? Do you have to share it? How many people do you have to share it with? Is it just your twin brother, or is it your twin brother and your older brother? Who is all there? Territory, what qualifies as the room itself, and then what qualifies as yours. So if you are lucky enough to have your own bedroom, then cool. What is yours? Probably whatever is inside those 4 walls. Once you open the door and step out, then that is no longer your territory, right? It becomes free domain for anyone in that house to use or to quote unquote own. But then let's say you have to share it with your twin brother, and your twin brother gets the south half and you get the north half. He's not allowed to touch your dresser and you're not allowed to touch his side of the closet. Anything like that. What is yours? Territory. And then there's that word sovereignty again. This is the full definition for it. It says a state's complete independence and power to make laws and foreign policy to determine its course of action. So sovereignty, again, means the ability to own yourself, the ability to govern yourself. So an example of this in real life is Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is not a sovereign state. They are a state themselves. They are their own nation. They have their own borders, territory, so on. They have their own cultures, languages, religions, everything like that. However, they cannot govern themselves, so we govern them, right? We, as the United States, own them, and the Puerto Rico government is also our government, okay? So when it comes back to your bedroom, sovereignty is, okay, so let's say, again, that you have to share with your twin brother. You're not supposed to touch his dresser because that's his. Once you go into uncharted territory, he has his own rules, and he says, hey, this is what is going to happen if you touch my stuff. This is how we're going to conduct things. Everybody understands in this room that if you touch something that's not yours, you're going to, I don't know, get a wedgie. I don't have a twin brother, but I'm just assuming that that's what would happen. Falsely, rather. And then government would be, okay, so how are you going to carry these things out? How do you keep these things in place? What laws are you going to pass? What rules are you going to have in your room? And then what are some punishments if those rules are not obeyed? How do you keep that order without hurting anybody? So those are our 4 essential features of a state. You have to have all 4 of these things in order to be a state, right? Population, territory, sovereignty, and government. So government is an institution through which the state maintains all of these different things. So I don't need to read to you, but at the same time, this is what our government is consistently trying to do. And when later we get into the idea of our Constitution and our preamble, you'll see that it will talk through all of these things. These are the four main things that why do we have government? In order to maintain all of these. Classifying governments. Okay, so when we are looking at what type of government is this, right? It's kind of like when you pick up a rock and you're like, oh, is this sedimentary, igneous, metamorphic? How do I classify this rock? You have different standards, right? You have to say, okay, it has a bunch of different layers. Okay, well, that means that that is a standard for sedimentary rocks. So it must go into this category. That's what we're doing when it comes to these three standards of government. We, in order to pick up this rock or this government and say, what kind of government are you? We have to look at these three different standards. Our first one is who can participate in the governing process. A short question would be, who has the power? Looking at this graphic is kind of trying to break down the different types of government based on who has the power. Okay? A monarchy showing that these people, they're this guy right here or gal, is in charge or ahead of all of these people. He has a crown, so we know that he is more royalty. This says aristocracy. That little blurb kind of popped up and got rid of the word. There it is. And that is a form of authoritarian style of government, which means that one person or a group of people has the power, and it's usually somebody that has a lot of money or a group of people that have a lot of money, a certain political party, so on. Democracy, all these people are equal. Republic, all these people are equal, working together. And I know what you're thinking. This guy right here, okay? Or this group of people right here. So anarchy is a style of government because it is the absence of government. Sort of like how the color white is the absence of all colors, right? Don't ask Mr. L that or Coach L about that. Don't out me like that. I'm sorry if there's any artists watching this and making fun of me, but you get my drift. Anarchy says that it's kind of every man for himself. There is no sort of government. So while these people are equal, and so are they equal in a democracy, whoever has the most resources, meaning guns or food, would be the ones in charge and kind of having the power from that. And it's very easy to overturn that power. So that's the first standard that we classify government by, who has the power. Our second one is where is the power? So we've got these three different distributions of power, right? So a unitary government is where powers are held by a single central agency, which is the federal government, right? Uni, meaning one, such as unicycle or unicorn, any of those things. University, one area. Universe, one body. Okay, then we have a confederation. We used to be a confederation. I know, history spoiler alert. We used to be a confederation, okay? Twice, actually. A confederation is the alliance of independent states. So that means that if Joe Schmo is over here and Joe Schmo says, ooh, can I draw? Pen. I can. Okay, so we've got Joe. Oops. Don't make fun of me. I know all of you are laughing at me, but it's fine. Okay, we have Joe and Larry. That's an R. Larry. And pick an easy letter to write. Hillman, Bob. Okay. B. O. B. Okay. So we've got these three people. Joe, Larry, and Bob. I know it looks like a V, but it's an R. Let's try some. Yeah, that looks better. Joe, Larry, and Bob. Okay, so Joe, Larry, and Bob are all friends. Okay? They are not one single central agency. However, they work together. Joe is his own person with his own ideas, own systems, own money, all of those things. However, he wants to work with Larry because he knows that Larry is really good at business and can help Joe out in his economic or financial standpoints. Joe and Larry meet Bob, and they find out that Bob is a great salesman, which would then increase all the things, right? They just work together. However, when it comes to money or rules or anything like that, they are separate, right? Cool. Can I... Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Hold on. Pen. Reset. Can I erase? Nope, that didn't work. Haha, erase pen. Thank you for your patience. Okay, like I said, I've never done this before, so thank you for your patience. Then we have a federal government, and federal government says that the powers between the state government and the central government are equal, right? They go hand in hand. So I have this sort of graphic, and it's kind of hard to see. Can I zoom in? I don't think so. But so we've got federal government here, where, do you remember this guy from your math classes, right? Okay, so this is a less than or greater than sign. This is technically a less than sign. But do you remember, did you have any teachers ever, green. They were like, oh, let's draw this. Again, I'm really sorry if there's an artist in this webinar that's making fun of me, but it's fine. Okay, that is supposed to be an alligator, but remember where this side had more and then this side had less, right? So what I want you to do is when looking at this is see that there's that sort of line in between here, meaning that these are equal, okay? Unitary, again, uni, meaning one. Put that in quotations. Okay. Uni, meaning that more power is up here. More power is in the central agency. Okay? So let's pointer options. No. Erase pen. So when we have our unitary government, we know that if we've got, let me change the pen color too, because that green was kind of hard to see. Just go black. So we have that central government, right? And then the states. Remember our alligator. Sheesh, that was bad. You get the gist. More. So in a unitary style of government, the central government, alligator over here, more power, means that there's more power in the central government, right? And then conversely, in a Confederate style government, we've got our central government and then our states. And we have more power in the states. Okay? Remember, the mouth is facing here. More. All right? So, oops. There's that. Oops. So our first standard is who has the power. Our second standard is where is the power. And our third standard would be the relationship between the executive and legislative branches. So L branch plus E branch equals what? And what I mean by this is through this graph. And you can draw this if you would like to. These three things are cutouts that I would normally cut out and copy, give to you to then glue in, but I understand that we do not have that option right now. So feel free to draw them if you would like to. I do recommend, if you're not drawing these people, I definitely recommend drawing this because this will be a question on your test on April 3rd. So make sure that you get this down and that you understand what the arrows mean and so on. Okay, L branch and E branch. So first we have a presidential style relationship, which is we have our voters, right? That's us, right? Even if you're not 18, you will be soon, and you should register to vote. So that is us, okay? We are here, the American people. Now, we vote for the legislative branch, right? And then we vote for the executive branch. The chief executive is the president, presidential style relationship. You can see that these are equal, right? Legislative branch and executive branch are a little bit higher than the voters, but we are a representative democracy, and that's how we operate off of. So that is the relationship. Equal relationship between the legislative branch and executive branch, but they are separate. Now, in a parliamentary relationship, there's the voters. This is what England uses. These are the voters, okay? They vote for the legislative branch. From the legislative branch, okay, from here, these people choose their executive, okay? So how that would work is, let's say that you play, I'm going to use soccer because that's what I coach, that's what I played for years. We've got our tryout group, okay? Everybody tries out. Let's say we have 100 people try out, okay? They're here. These are the voters. From these 100 people, 50 are chosen. 50 make the team. They are the legislative branch. Now, from the legislative branch, from that first team, we as a team will decide who we want to be our captain, and they are in charge of us. Okay, so These, when it comes to L branch plus E branch, these are separate. These are together. And this one is higher than this one. If you guys have ever heard of the Prime Minister, that's who their chief executive is. Okay? So our three standards of government that we can classify governments by are who has the power, where is the power, and legislative branch plus executive branch, or relationship between L branch and E branch. Okay, so this should be the end of day 4 for you. Feel free to pause and take a break from this video and just kind of hang out and wait until day 5. All right, y'all. So this should be day 5 for you. So it should be March 24th. Yesterday, you should have watched or at least taken notes over 1L through 2R. And now you're going to take notes / listen to 3L through 4R. After you finish this section of the video, you should take the quiz over 1L through 4R. Okay, it's about 30 questions. And it's to, one, help you prepare for your test in the long run and kind of show you where you stand on this. And it also helps you with, it keeps you accountable for the notes that you're taking. Again, this is a grade. Your notes are always a grade. You should get notes or get credit for the work that you're doing, right? And this is work, okay? So keep that in mind. But okay, with that being said, let's jump right into 3L and 4R. Or through 4R. Okay, so this is going to be pretty simple. I won't need to explain these a whole lot. It's just the different types of government. Because remember, yesterday we looked at the classifying standards, and now we're looking at the types of government. So in order to figure out what the types of government are, we had to go through and say, okay, well, who can participate? Who has the power? And so on and so forth. So these are our main 4. Underneath authoritarian and totalitarian, these are the same. I think this one, authoritarian, is used more frequently. So, but yeah, they're one and the same. There are 2 that go underneath this category, because again, how we're classifying them based off of those 3 standards. But yeah, so these are our main 4. Our first one is constitutional. The best way to explain this one is kind of like a rule book when it comes to sports. So a constitution, yes, we have a constitution, but we are not a constitutional style of government, because this type of government says that there is a rule book, just like out here in the open, and says, hey, these are the rules. This is what you can and can't do. And the government acts as sort of the referee. So in a football game, when somebody has an illegal hit, okay? They have an illegal hit, the ref throws the flag and says, hey, you can't do that. This is the punishment for it. It's a 5 or 10 yard penalty, potential ejection from the game, so on. The ref is not creating those laws, and he or she is not making them or writing them, anything like that. He has just looked at the rule book and said, okay, this is what you're not allowed to do. You did that. This is the punishment. We move on. Okay, that's a constitutional style of government. We have a little bit more to that than this, but this is one of those styles. Our next one is a authoritarian style of government, where this controls all aspects of a citizen's political, social, and economic lives. So they control everything. This is like communist Russia. This is like, back in the day with Italy and Mussolini. This is like North Korea. All of those things. This is an authoritarian style of government. The government is in charge. We have two types. We have a dictatorship and what's called an oligarchy. Not Olive Garden, oligarchy or oligarchy, either one. A dictatorship is where the power of this authoritative government is in the hands of one sole person. So it's just one person that has all of that power. Mussolini was a dictator. Stalin was a dictator. Now I know what you're thinking. You might be thinking to yourself, the next person that she has to name is going to be Hitler. And I'm not going to. And here's why. Hitler, yes, had total control of all citizens' political, social, and economic lives. However, he was a fascist. We will not dive into that, but for your purpose of knowledge, he was a fascist because he used systemic racism and militaristic power in order to get what he wanted. So he said that one group was better than the other, meaning the Aryans, white, blonde hair, blue-eyed people, that they were the top race and they were the golden piece of our society, of our species. And that Jewish people with brown hair, brown eyes, large noses, worshipped Jesus, but had those other sort of tendencies such as not believing in the New Testament, so on and so forth. He said that they were the reason for our species' downfall. And he used those ideas to gain power. That is fascism. Dictatorship, there are good dictators. Just because someone is a dictator does not mean that they are bad, mean, ugly, so on. But it just means that they have the power in it's just them, one person. Oligarchy is the power in the hands of a few people or a political party. So remember when I talked about aristocracy in the last video, or yesterday, this guy right here holding all the money, that is a oligarchy sort of idea. Yeah, I think that's all I really have to say about that. It's the same sort of idea, except dictatorship is one, oligarchy is multiple people. Monarchy, I don't really have to explain. King, queen, emperor. A lot of times people will get dictatorship and monarchy confused when it comes to test day because it is matching. The key words that you need to look for in the definitions are king, queen, and emperor. Okay, that's what sets this monarchy apart from a dictatorship. Then we have a democracy, and this is where government is ruled by the people, either directly or by using representatives. Now, a direct democracy would be if I asked you to, raise your hand, not that I can see you, but if we were in person, raise your hand if you want to watch Lion King today. And you guys would raise your hands, put them down. Then I'd say, okay, raise your hand if you want to watch Aladdin today. Raise your hand, put them down. Whoever had the most, majority rules, ta-da, Lion King wins. I don't know. And we watch Lion King, ta-da. Now, a representative democracy is what we have. We vote as the United States. We vote for who we want to vote for us. Okay, there's kind of that middleman. So if I said, okay, class, half of you are going to be represented by Larry, and the other half of you are going to be represented by Sally. Larry's group, you guys decide whether you want to watch Lion King or Aladdin, and Sally's group, you guys decide whether or not you want to watch Lion King or Aladdin. Everybody tells Sally, hey, I want to watch Aladdin. She's like, all right, cool, sweet, we'll watch Aladdin then. She comes up and tells me, we want to watch Aladdin. I'm like, all right, cool. Larry, what about your group? And let's say everybody has told Larry, hey, I really want to watch Lion King. Like, it's my favorite. I love Matthew Broderick, whatever. So Larry says, okay, everybody wants to watch Lion King. And then he gets up to me and he says, I think I want to watch Aladdin. We want to watch Aladdin. Now, that's the issue with the representative democracy, is that sometimes people can tend to look after their own interests rather than what the group thinks. But that's another debate for a different day. Principles of a democracy. Most of these I don't really need to explain. I am going to touch on the rule of law. Rule of law says that the government cannot just run around and kind of do whatever it wants. Okay? It has to go through certain steps. It also means that the government, oh goodness.
Please pardon the interruption. Staff, thank you for your help. So the lunches today, we really appreciate that. There are some leftover cheeseburgers, hamburgers, and additional items to go with them. So if you want to come out into the cafeteria, you can get that for lunch if you would like. Thank you.
It also means that like the government couldn't just kick down my door and say, hey, Hillman, I don't like your face. You're going to jail for 25 years. Rule of law says that there is a set of laws, and that's what you have to go by. You can't just randomly, that's what arbitrary means. You cannot just randomly use your power because you have power. Okay, you have to follow the law. Everyone is equal under the law. English influence on government. These 5 people are super, super, super important into what kind of country we are today. This part is also matching on your tests, and through your quizzes, it is multiple choice. So make sure that you are paying attention to their descriptions. So first we have Sir William Blackstone. Best way to remember him is Blackstone Bible. They both have B's. But he essentially said that God wrote the Bible. No man is higher than God. And in the Bible, we have a bunch of laws and rules that we have to follow. So therefore, nobody should be putting themselves higher than God and creating their own laws. Very old school way of thinking. Old school. Old school even for these guys. Thomas Hobbes, not Coach Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes, said that the natural state of man is war. If we were to put them on a spectrum, he would be a far left, and not even a left in the sense of Democrats and Republicans, or liberals and conservatives, but just putting him on a spectrum. He'd be on the left-hand side of the spectrum at the very, very far end. And he would say that everybody is needing to give up their certain freedoms and liberties in order to know that everybody else isn't going to be running around like the purge. He felt like everyone, all men as in like mankind, not like men versus women, all man is animalistic, very Lord of the Flies-esque. So he is a huge contributor to that social contract theory that we talked about yesterday on page 2R. Okay, so he is on one complete side of the spectrum, and then John Locke is in the middle, more centralized. He says that everybody is born with a blank slate. Everyone is born equal. Everybody has these three rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The best way to remember him is the idea of life, liberty, Locke, right? Those three L's: life, liberty, and then Locke. But yeah, he said that everybody was born just as a blank sheet of paper, and from there, society is what determined if you were going to be good or bad. But you cannot take away those three, what's called inalienable rights, non-foreign rights. And then Jean-Jacques Rousseau is how you say his name. Not Jean-Jacques Rousseau, or however you would want to say it. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, he's French. He is on the right side of the spectrum. Again, not based on the fact of liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republic, but just a spectrum. Okay, one end is Hobbes, middle is Locke, and the other end is Rousseau. He says that all men are born good but corrupted by society, and that laws are only binding when we say so. So this kind of comes off of why do we wear our seatbelts all the time, but when we're in the neighborhood and nobody's out, that we don't completely stop at a stop sign? Why do we follow some rules and not the others? Because we decide whether or not they are binding and when and where and so on. So Jean-Jacques Rousseau, all men are born good but corrupted by society. I had a student a couple years ago that said he remembered it by thinking Jean-Jacques, goody goody, just to kind of connect those two things together. And then we have Charles Louis de Montesquieu. Montesquieu came up with the idea of the separation of powers. He studied a lot of different governments and decided, oh my gosh, people are so power hungry and so aggressive, and everybody keeps falling. These governments keep falling because everybody's trying to get power over somebody else. Someone becomes too power hungry, they get out of control, and then somebody else has to take them over, and it's just a whole thing. So what if we created, in our case, it's three separate bodies that all have the same amount of power to avoid one group or individual, because we could have the power of one person or this oligarchy, have one person getting too powerful and too aggressive. Okay, so it's kind of like if you and your three other friends made a t-shirt business, and one of you is the designer, one of you is the salesman, one of you is the bookkeeper, making sure that you have all of the different finances, and then one of you is the promoter. Okay, you do all the marketing. So all of you have invested everything that you have into this business. Okay, so all of you each get 25% of that company. Now, if your friend Billy is starting to get a little power hungry and is starting to make more decisions without asking you or asking your coworkers, then you guys are going to be like, hey, bro, Billy, chill out, man. You are not any better than we are. We have equal rights and equal power, so on. And you guys are going to try to keep him in check. So that's where the idea of checks and balances came from, is from Montesquieu and this separation of powers. Okay, 4L. This is a timeline of events leading up to the Declaration of Independence, okay? They're all right here, minus the Boston Tea Party, okay? That's thrown in there to kind of give a little bit of insight of where all of these other things happened around it. This is a cutout also. However, please feel free to draw it, but also know that these are written in order as well. You might want to add in the Boston Tea Party right in here, but that's up to you. So just to briefly go.
Coach Sear, if you're in the building, please call guidance. Coach Sear, if you're in the building, please call guidance.
So again, to just move through these, some of them I'll explain and kind of provide more of a story. Others I don't need to talk through. So first we have the Mayflower Compact, and that was our first governing document of Plymouth. Okay, and very self-explanatory. Fast forward over 100 years, about 130 years, and we have now flourished. We are our own colonies and so on. We end up going to war with the French and the Indians, okay? Us British at this time were very arrogant, and we wanted everyone to know who lost the war, who fought it, was the French and the Indians, and they both lost. But it was a very expensive war, okay? It lasted for 7 years. It lasted for 9 years. And it was just a whole deal. It was very expensive. And we kind of wrecked the Americas, or at least, yeah, both of them really. And that's expensive to try to like bring back up. So towards the end of the French and Indian War, King George III comes to power. King George III is who's known as Mad King George. He did have a STD that had him, a symptom of this STD was that he peed blue, and he kind of went a little crazy. He was reported to have had some sort of auditory and visual delusions. But yeah, so King George was a little bit off his rocker. So about 5 years after King George comes to power, 2 years after the war has officially ended, and we still have to pay for it. It's getting so out of control. King George's colonists are having to work overtime, having to send as much money as possible. The people in Great Britain are getting really angry, and they're thinking, hey, we didn't fight this war. Why should we have to pay? So King George says, you are so right. Why should you have to pay? King George then sets what's called the Stamp Act on the colonists, which taxes stamps on newspapers and legal and commercial documents. Commercial documents meaning like letters, like everyday sort of things. Now, this was such a big deal that think about having to pay $1 for every time you either sent something out on your phone, whether it's a tweet, TikTok, a like on an Instagram post, an actual Instagram post, whatever, and any time that you received a notification. Yeah, so anytime, even the ones that you don't want, like when the news app sometimes tells you like, oh, like there was an earthquake or something, and you're like, oh, cool. That would be taxed. You would have to pay $1 every time that happened. So people were getting really, really mad because this was getting expensive. So what they did was, like any human, they decided, okay, well, we're going to work around this. And they started finding other ways to avoid taxes on newspapers, documents, etc. King George found out because they're obviously not bringing in enough money to pay for the war. So he came up with the Townshend Acts. And those are a group of 3 acts that pretty much just taxed everything else that the colonists used. Glass, lead, paint, paper, tea, so on. Now, this is where the Boston Tea Party comes in. After about 6-ish years of this going on, we had had enough. We were being taxed without being represented. We were having to quarter soldiers. People were getting taken overseas for crimes that they didn't commit. And we were ticked off. So we decided to go to the harbor and dump gallons, tons, literal tons of gallons of bricks, pounds of tea into the Boston Harbor. This was so much tea that the ships could not get into the harbor for weeks, months, 2 months. And it wasn't like it was just we dumped a little thing of tea into the harbor and we're like, oh, yay, ta-da, we're done. Nope, we threw a banger, okay? We decided that if we were going to do this, we were going to protest hard. We dressed up like Indians, and we had music and dancing. People were drinking, and no one from the British Army could do anything about it. Well, that cost the British government a lot of money. And it really made them mad because we were defying the government, right? We were being a bunch of jerks. So King George then passed the Intolerable Acts, which again was another series of acts that were in direct response to the Boston Tea Party. The Boston Tea Party was intolerable, meaning will not be permitted, will not be tolerated, those actions. So the Intolerable Acts were just a more harsh governings, I guess I should say, such as, like I said, having to quarter soldiers. They had to have a curfew. They would have to have even more taxes on more things. And it was a whole deal. So we petitioned King George and said, hey, man, we're sorry that we were such jerks, but like you were a jerk too. So can you stop? And he said no. So we created the First Continental Congress. And this is where we talked about, okay, fine. King George is mad at us, and he did not look at our petition and realize that this was out of hand. He did not agree to stop the Intolerable Acts, which is what the petition was for. And so the First Continental Congress said, all right, we are going to resist. However, we got one more shot. We asked the king for forgiveness and said, hey, how do we feel about all of these certain things? Hold on, my computer is going to die. One moment. So after the First Continental Congress, we essentially were just kind of like setting up rules and getting ready for what's to happen. 6 months go by. King George rejects the petition. Okay? It's been done. So they send out one more hand. Okay? They send what's called the Olive Branch Treaty. The Olive Branch Treaty is, they were extending an olive branch, meaning they were saying, hey, we're really sorry that we did this, but you have to understand that this is what you did to make us feel this way, and how are we going to combat this? I'm sorry. I hope you're sorry. Let's just move on. Now, they sent that off, and then they created the Second Continental Congress. This is where they had a plan in place of if King George rejects our Olive Branch Treaty, we are going to war. History spoiler alert, we go to war, okay? We were awarded the best breakup letter for breaking up with King George. We straight up said, it's not us, it's you. Here is a list of 60 plus reasons why it's you and how awful of a person you are. And we're done. We out. So, yeah. After you finish this video, you should read over your notes a couple times and then go ahead and take the quiz on Google Classroom for 1L through 4R. Okay, and then we will start day 6 tomorrow.